future church. And basically, we're doing this series because there's something that is very, very true. And that is, in America, people leaving organized religion is trending. That's the only way you can look at it. Last week we looked at the statistics and the specifics around that. I encourage you to go back if you maybe missed last week, especially our introduction where we talk about that. You can go to our YouTube channel and look at that. But organized religion, people are leaving it in America. The number one religiously affiliated group are the religious nuns. Those who say that we are not affiliated. So, we want to talk about how does a church have future influence? How do you move church into the future? But first we want to talk about what do we mean when we say church. So I want to be real clear on this, so that every time we use the term church in this series, that we understand exactly what we're talking about. We're all on the same page. And what we mean by church is this: when people gather on purpose, with purpose, they tend to organize around purpose. You see, the word that Jesus used is this word ekklesia that just meant gathering or assembly. So Jesus said, I will build my church. It's basically this called out group of citizens called into the public square for this specific purpose of gathering around something. And he said, I'm going to have a gathering in my name. The people who follow me. And so when we talk about a church, we're not talking about a building. When we talk about a church, we're not necessarily even talking about organized religion as a construct. What we're talking about is the gathering of people who follow Jesus, and I would say that often includes, and we're going to see that it does include often people who maybe don't even follow Jesus, but are listening in, are exploring, and are looking into this Jesus movement. And so that's what Jesus is talking about. That's what we're talking about. Here at Downtown Faith, we organize around a purpose, and that purpose is to help people follow Jesus into a new life by creating space to discuss life and faith. And so whether it's this space, Puppyology, our laundry project space, we want to create space to discuss life and faith. So throughout this series, we're asking this question: how do you carry an ancient movement with an ancient message into a modern future? And some people would say, listen, religion's a problem, church is a problem, faith is a problem. You can't carry it, it's losing relevance, you can't carry it into the future. I would say, and this series is a lot of, I want to kind of give my perspective on some things when it comes to future church, but also I want to hear from you guys, and I want us all to be discussing this question here, is how do we do that? Last week, we said characteristic number one of a future church is that it embodies irresistible. And our idea worth discussing is this: a church with future influence embodies irresistible by each othering each other. We said that if you look at the letters to the churches and to this gathering of people in Jesus' name from the first century, from the church leaders, one of the things that they constantly encourage people to do is to love each other like Jesus loved them. And then you see all these other each others. We want you to love each other, but also serve each other, forgive each other, agree with each other, restore each other, carry each other's burdens. And we say that this small people group that was actually oppressed and persecuted at times in the Roman Empire, in 300 years grew to be the preferred religious group, if you will, in the Roman Empire. And a lot of that was because it was irresistible to people. Like, they just loved like no one else. And when people would look into this group, what they saw was something special, and people wanted to be a part of this group. And we said that we can be that kind of gathering together by each other and embodying irresistible. And I think that the way a church loves is what it will propel it into the future. And it starts within the community, within the gathering, but it also kind of spills out into the surrounding community as well. And so that's characteristic number one. By embodying irresistible, we move the church into this positive future. But characteristic number two, probably my personal favorite, is this: it encourages engagement. A future church will encourage engagement. And so our idea we're discussing, we're going to unpack that, is this: a church with future influence encourages inside-out engagement. And here's why we say inside out. A lot of times people have this perspective that church is a building and that building is sacred and the people that are there are sacred, or at least the leaders who maybe stand on stage or wear certain garb, that they are sacred, and that there's this sacred space and then there's this other regular secular space that is everything else. And I think we encourage this inside out engagement because there is no more it's all sacred. It's not sacred and secular. It's not divided. Ultimately, it's all sacred. God is redeeming and restoring all things, and so it is all sacred. And wherever we go, we carry that Spirit of God with us. The whole thing is sacred. And so I want to look at what this inside-out engagement looks like. And I think to look forward, sometimes you have to look backwards. And so I want to look at the early church, and when all this thing kind of began to blow up, starting in Jerusalem and then spreading throughout literally, ultimately, the entire world. I want to look at some of the characteristics and some of the things that how these people engaged with each other and how they engaged with the community around them. So, in Acts chapter 2, what had happened was Peter preached this message at this Jewish festival, and these people began to follow Jesus. And it says all the believers, so the people who believed this message that Peter had said about Jesus, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. It's like the idea they had this really good reputation with the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship, the word there in the Greek is he added to their ekklesia, he added to their gathering, he added to their group that gathered those who were being saved, those who were coming to a knowledge, Jesus is the way, and we're beginning to follow Jesus. As a matter of fact, the people at that time, they weren't known as Christians, they were known as people of the way. And so they were seeing Jesus as the way. Another term for that was they were being saved, and they were being added to this gathering. And so we see this almost this natural rhythm that they had, where they were still going to the temple, but they were having these different conversations in the temples and in the synagogues. They were then meeting in each other's homes, and they were sitting at each other's tables, and they were communing together on a regular basis, almost like they had this rhythm, and then they began to, even within that, to each other by selling off possessions so that people who didn't have could have, and people who had, their extra could be someone else's enough, and they began to live this life together, and they were engaged in each other's lives. It wasn't about an event. It was about these people, and it was about being together, and this was changing their lives and ultimately changing their community and changing the world around them. And so fast forward a little bit, there's this guy by the name of Paul, and he used to be one of the religious elite, and he was very dedicated, so much so that he thought this Jesus movement needed to be stopped. And so he was arresting these people, and he was even standing by and ordering the killings of these people. And then he had his life radically changed by Jesus, and he becomes a leader now of this Jesus gathering. And he starts Jesus gatherings wherever he goes. And he takes this very interesting approach where he would go into a city and he would go into the synagogue where they were, and he would talk to the religious leaders there of the Jewish religion, because these were his people, that was his background. But then he would also go into the public square and have these conversations, and he would connect with people. And here's a little bit of his story, and I love this story. So he's in Athens, and it says he went to the synagogue to reason with the Jews, and this is they would kind of like work these things out together. and the God-fearing Gentiles, and he spoke daily in the public square to all who happened to be there. So he would go into this space, and whoever was there, he was going to talk with them about Jesus. He also had a debate with some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. So the Greek philosophers of the day, he's philosophizing with them and discussing these things with them. When he told them about Jesus and his resurrection, which that was the thing, the belief that kind of unified this gathering in Jesus' name, it says they said, "What's this babbler trying to say with these strange ideas he's picked up? Like, this guy's just talking nonsense." Others said, "He seems to be preaching about some foreign gods." Then they took him to the high council, or the Areopagus, of the city, and they come tell us about this new teaching, they said. And so here's what he does. He goes into their world, and he uses the world around them, and he uses their culture to talk with them and to discuss with them about Jesus. He says, "So Paul, standing before the council, addressed them as follows. 'Men of Athens, I noticed that you are very religious in every way. For as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines. And one of your altars had this inscription to it." Right? So here's what he's saying. Like, you're religious, ultimately, like you're very spiritual people. You understand what I'm talking about here, but let me like bring it in home for you guys. He says this: "You have this altar that has a shrine to an unknown God. This God, whom you worship without knowing, is the one that I'm telling you about." And so he starts using their own poets, and he starts quoting them, and they're like, oh, and he's making this connection to this God that sits above every other God, and is the ground of being for all of us, and his source. And he starts, we're all from this God, and he talks about this God sent this man, and this man was resurrected to prove that he was God's man. And he connects to them, and he got about the same response that you still get when you talk like that to people. Some of the people, they laughed at him and ignored him, dismissed him. Some of the people said, "Let's talk about this again. Let's come back to this. We want to hear more about this." And then some people, and it actually gives even 3 specific names. My guess is that people would have recognized the names of these people. And they joined it. Two men and a woman joined him. They joined this gathering, and then he ended up starting a gathering in that area. And that's pretty much what happens when you go into the public square and you begin talking to people. But we see this inside-out engagement. It was engagement with the gathering, but also this gathering engaging with the public square. And so when we talk about encouraging engagement, I think the church of the future will necessarily look like this church of the past, where there's this gathering here, but then there's this other public square mindset. And so I want to talk about an engaging church, and then I really want to hone in on what we mean about taking this gathering and engaging with each other, but also engaging in the public square. So an engaging church, first off, garners greater interaction through smaller gatherings. Greater interaction through smaller gatherings. Carey Nieuwhof is a Canadian pastor who does a lot of work with pastors and the future of church, especially as culture moves more post and even un-Christian. And Canada would even be, he would say we're probably about 10 years ahead of that movement in Canada. He says this, he says, "The future church will become bigger and smaller at the same time." It will become bigger and smaller at the same time. I think of it this way. It's addition through multiplication. It's more smaller spaces to discuss life and faith. And I think that that's important. I mean, I look at a city like Las Vegas. It's a 24/7 town. I have people all the time, they're like, "Man, I would love to come be a part of things like that, but I'm working at that time," right? Like if you have this one space at this one time, it's just difficult to really engage the community. And we're going to talk about what we want to do with that here at Downtown Faith, but the idea is it's going to be more smaller gatherings engaging people in life and faith. And I think that and I agree with Carey Nieuwhof here, that the future will become bigger and smaller at the same time. But it also leads us to this, is that an engaging church values circles over rows, table sitting over theater seating. It's not going to be about come to this event. people, I think, are being done with that. If you look at the marketing work, the research that's been done with Gen Z, which are people that are about, like kids that aren't even born yet and are about 19 right now. They just graduated high school last year. Not this year, last year. It's like the top of this Gen Z, right? Because you have the millennials and then you have this next generation. And they're more about collaboration. They don't want to come just sit and watch the show. That was, I believe, necessary in church world for a time. But that things are shifting and things are changing. It's not about come sit in these rows and listen and watch. It's about, no, come sit around the table and let's participate. I think churches that engage people are going to look more like support groups. And they're going to value circles over rows. Carey Nieuwhof also says this in his research on future church. In the future church, attendance won't drive engagement. Engagement will drive attendance. Why? Because the people who are engaged are the ones that are going to be there. The people who are digging in and are getting into the life of the church are the ones who are going to be there and be engaged. And then lastly, an engaging church creates engaging conversations, not echo chambers. And here's what we mean by this. Agreement doesn't determine acceptance, and disagreement doesn't destroy a relationship. Imagine a space like that, where agreement doesn't necessarily determine your acceptance within that group, within that gathering, and disagreement doesn't destroy your relationship. That you come together, othering each other, and you love each other, and you serve each other, and you forgive each other, and we're gracing each other in such a powerful way that you're not creating echo chambers, you're creating conversations. And conversations are about people exchanging ideas. And I think that is true, deep communion when you're doing that and you're talking and discussing spiritual matters and life's most important matters. And that's what I want Downtown Faith to be, that kind of church, where you don't have to just agree with everyone or you're out. As we saw in the video last week, someone was sharing their story. That was their story. We're not in agreement anymore on certain things, and so we just don't belong anymore. And I think we need to flip that around in the future of church. I write this in my book, Build a Bigger Table, about this. If people feel heard, they will engage. If they will participate. They will come back, and through meaningful conversation, they may begin to follow Jesus. By sitting at our tables, they move towards the table of Jesus. And that's the goal. That's what we want to help people follow Jesus. That's what we're doing. That's the purpose that we organize around. I would say the most difficult part of this in modern America is actually conveying to people that you care enough to listen. Because I think if you look at some of the culture's idea of religious organizations and churches, the fact that they listen and care isn't even ever described. And what if we were a group of people that just cared so much about people that we listened to their stories and we grew in empathy for people and we gave them the grace necessary for them to come to a table and to talk about Jesus and maybe even begin this relationship with God through Jesus that changes their life. A church with future influence encourages inside-out engagement. The very life of a Jesus gathering is in including everyone, those who believe and those who do not yet believe, in a very big discussion about what it means to be human, made in the image of the divine. And so we talk about engagement here, and I'll say this, as the core team that first began Downtown Faith, as we were creating what this space would even look like and what this church could even look like, we defined engagement like this. We said if we want the thing that we are described as to be engaging, and this is how we define that, is that people are invited in to participate and encouraged to come back. They're invited into participation and encouraged to come back. They're encouraged because they want to be around these people because they are loved so well and they were heard and they were listened to and they were cared about. I don't know if I agree with everything, but I want to come back and be around these people and have these discussions. Why? Because Downtown Faith aims to be a people who gather in any place and a place for any person to gather. And here's what I mean by that. So again, we've seen there's this gathering, and it's almost like this group of people is separated from the public square, right? And the goal, a lot of times for many churches, and I've worked for a lot of churches, I've been in church world for a long time, is you want to get these people to come to this gathering, right? Like that's the goal. And so you create events, you maybe even community events or whatever, and you're going to share the gospel at that event, or you're going to do something. But basically, what you're trying to do, as you do any of this, you're trying to get these people in the public square to come to be a part of this gathering. And then there's kind of a rise, and this is like, well, we need to be community focused, and so then you have these people kind of going into the public square again with the agenda of getting the public square to come to their gathering, right? To come to their event, to their weekend gathering, to the services, whatever. And I kind of have this picture of something even more different than either one of these approaches. And it's this. It's the public square, and the gathering of Jesus is just in it. It's just a people that are so integrated, fully integrated into the public square, that when people talk about downtown Las Vegas, one of the things that they talk about is, well, yeah, there's a church, there's a gathering of people here, and they've created spaces all over where they're just a natural part of the life and rhythm of downtown Las Vegas. I want to see this church start businesses to create jobs for people who need it. And those businesses become places that people frequent. And they know that this gathering has fully integrated into the city. It is the public space. Church becomes the public space. It doesn't just go into the public space. It doesn't invite the public space, the public square into its gathering. It's all one thing. It's fully integrated. And that's maybe a big vision. If you think of, hey, we're a small group of people that just started, and this is maybe a difficult community in your mindset for people to understand church. And a lot of the people that are walking away from church and losing their religion are the people that are in this community. And I think that this approach will help clear distinction, like the blurry lines of church, where it's all washed away and it's all one thing. That this is a people and they're part of this place, and it's a both and it's all sacred, it's all God's. And God loves everyone, and so we just go into that space and we integrate ourselves fully into that space.